My name is Emily Vance, and I am 40 years old. Until 3 months ago, my life felt like a well-curated exhibition, harmonious, balanced, filled with the quiet beauty my late husband, Richard, and I had cultivated together. We lived in a historic brownstone in Boston's Beacon Hill, a home filled not just with valuable art, my passion and former career as a curator, but with 20 years of shared laughter, quiet conversations, and mutual respect. Richard was the founder and CEO of Vance Innovations, a successful biotech company he built from the ground up. He was brilliant, driven, but also incredibly kind, the steady anchor to my more artistic temperament. His sudden death from a massive heart attack while on a business trip didn't just break my heart, it shattered the very foundation of my world. The weeks following the funeral were a blur of suffocating grief and overwhelming logistics. Richard, meticulous as ever, had left his affairs in perfect order. As his sole beneficiary, I inherited everything: the company, the investments, our beautiful home. It was a staggering responsibility, one I felt utterly unprepared for in the fog of loss. That's when Richard's siblings, Arthur and Beatrice, stepped in. Arthur, Richard's older brother by 5 years, ran a struggling financial consultancy. He possessed a surface charm that always felt slightly too smooth, too practiced. Beatrice, the younger sister, cultivated an image of fragile sensitivity, always expressing concern with wide, sympathetic eyes that somehow never seemed entirely genuine. They descended upon the brownstone immediately after the funeral, ostensibly to offer support, bringing casseroles and condolences. "Emily, darling, you mustn't worry about a thing," Beatrice murmured, placing a cool hand on my arm as I stared blankly at a stack of condolence cards. "Arthur and I will help you through this. Richard would have wanted us to." "Absolutely," Arthur chimed in, already sorting through the mail on Richard's antique desk in the study. "These financial matters can be so complex. Best leave the heavy lifting to us while you focus on healing." At first, their presence felt like a small comfort in the crushing loneliness. They handled calls, sorted paperwork, and spoke in soothing tones about protecting Richard's legacy. But gradually, subtly, the nature of their help began to shift. It started with small comments, seeds of doubt planted with feigned concern. "Are you sure Richard explained this trust structure to you, Emily?" Arthur asked one afternoon, frowning at a complex portfolio statement. "It's quite intricate. He mentioned to me he was planning some adjustments." He let the sentence hang, implying a conversation I wasn't privy to. "Richard always handled the investments," Beatrice added softly, refilling my tea. "He knew how overwhelming you found it all. He wouldn't want you burdened now." I didn't find it overwhelming. While Richard managed the bulk of the high-level finances, I had always been involved, understood our assets, and even co-managed our personal accounts and the household budget meticulously. But in my grief-stricken state, their confident assertions began to erode my own certainty. Did Richard mention adjustments? Had I misunderstood the trust structure? My mind felt foggy, unreliable. They started helping more proactively. Arthur would take stacks of financial documents to his office for review, returning them with confusing summaries or highlighting minor discrepancies he claimed needed urgent attention he was happy to provide. Beatrice would rearrange things in Richard's study, moving papers, misplacing files I needed, then sighing sympathetically when I couldn't find them. "Oh, Emily, your mind must be completely overloaded. Let me help you look." The file would inevitably reappear later, exactly where I thought I'd left it, making me question my own memory. "Richard always kept the quarterly reports in the blue binder, didn't he?" Arthur asked casually one day. I distinctly remembered Richard switching to digital records 2 years ago, but Arthur insisted. "No, I'm quite sure he mentioned the blue binder just last month." He sounded so certain that I began to doubt myself. Was my memory failing me under the stress? Beatrice focused on my emotional state. "You seem so fragile, dear," she'd murmur, patting my hand. "Perhaps you should consider letting Arthur take power of attorney, just temporarily, to ease the burden until you feel stronger." The suggestion was floated gently, wrapped in concern, but it sent a chill down my spine. Power of attorney? Why? They began suggesting I wasn't capable of managing Vance Innovations. "Running a biotech company requires a very specific skill set, Emily," Arthur said gravely during one of their impromptu strategy sessions in my living room. Richard had unique insights. Perhaps it would be best for the company for his legacy if I stepped in as interim CEO, just until things stabilize. The board would understand, Beatrice added quickly. They know how distraught you are.
Distraught, yes.
Incompetent, no. I had sat beside Richard for years, listening to him discuss the company, understanding the broad strokes, even offering insights from my own different perspective. I wasn't a scientist, but I wasn't an idiot. Yet, their relentless, subtle undermining began to take its toll. I started second-guessing myself, feeling overwhelmed by tasks I knew I could handle just weeks before. Was I really falling apart? Was grief clouding my judgment so severely? The turning point came during a search for Richard's old passport. We had planned a trip to Italy before his death, and I wanted to find it a small, tangible piece of a future we never got. I remembered him mentioning putting it in his study desk drawer after our last trip. I searched the drawer, nothing. I checked his briefcase, his travel bags, still nothing. Arthur and Beatrice were there, helping me sort through Richard's personal effects. Are you sure he put it there, Emily? Beatrice asked gently. Your memory might be playing tricks on you. Grief does strange things. Maybe he stored it in the safe deposit box, Arthur suggested helpfully. We could go check tomorrow if you like. Frustrated and doubting myself, I gave up the search. Later that evening, needing a distraction, I decided to finally tackle the clutter on Richard's side of our bedroom closet. As I sorted through his old sweaters, my hand brushed against something small and hard tucked inside the pocket of a worn cashmere cardigan he rarely wore. It was the passport, exactly where it shouldn't have been, nowhere near his desk or travel gear. And tucked inside the passport was a tiny, almost invisible memory card. My breath caught. Richard wasn't particularly tech-savvy outside of his work. Why would he hide a memory card and an old passport in a random sweater pocket? My heart began to pound with a mixture of dread and adrenaline. This felt deliberate. This felt like Richard. My hands trembled as I retrieved my laptop and inserted the card. It contained only one folder, cryptically labeled Insurance Policy. Inside wasn't a policy, but a series of video files named sequentially by date, starting about 6 months before Richard's death. I clicked on the first file. Richard's face appeared on screen, looking tired but resolute, seated in his study. The digital clock on his desk showed a date from last spring. Emily, he began, his voice low, his gaze direct, and filled with a love that made my throat tighten. If you're watching this, then the worst has happened and I'm gone. And I suspect Arthur and Beatrice have already begun their performance. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. I know this is hard to hear, especially now, but you need to know the truth. My siblings, they have always resented my success. They see the company, the money, even you, as something that should rightfully be theirs. And I have reason to believe they won't simply accept my will. He leaned closer. A few months ago, I installed a small, discreet camera in my study. Call it paranoia, call it prudence. It records audio and video whenever there's movement. The memory card is hidden where only you might find it, inside my old passport, in the pocket of that awful green cardigan you always hated. A faint smile touched his lips. I started noticing inconsistencies. Arthur asking strange questions about controlling shares, Beatrice making comments about your lack of business sense. I needed to know what was happening when I wasn't there. He looked directly into the camera. I suspect they'll try to gaslight you, Emily. Make you doubt your memory, your competence, your sanity. They will try to convince you and others that you are incapable of managing what is rightfully yours. They want control. Don't let them have it. You are smarter, stronger, and more capable than they could ever imagine. Watch the recordings, Kat. See them for who they really are. Use this. Protect yourself. Protect my legacy. The video ended. I sat there, frozen, the sound of Richard's voice echoing in the silent room. A hidden camera. Recordings. Gaslighting. It wasn't just my grief-addled mind. It was a deliberate, calculated campaign. My grief momentarily gave way to a cold, sharp fury. With trembling hands, I clicked on the next file, then the next. Hours passed as I watched the recordings, each one a sickening confirmation of Richard's suspicions. I saw Arthur and Beatrice in Richard's study, days after the funeral, their masks of grief slipping the moment they thought they were alone. She's completely lost, Arthur said, rifling through papers on Richard's desk in one recording. Just keep emphasizing how complex everything is. Plant a few doubts about Richard's recent decisions. She'll be begging us to take over within a month. And the board? Beatrice asked, perched delicately on the edge of Richard's leather chair. Already working on them, Arthur smirked, hinting that Richard was under stress, maybe not making the best choices. Laying the groundwork for a smooth transition to more experienced leadership. In another video, I watched Beatrice subtly move the quarterly reports I had been looking for, hiding them under a stack of unrelated files. Later that day, on camera, she feigned sympathy as I searched frantically. "Oh, Emily, are you sure you saw them here? Maybe you put them somewhere else?" The recordings were damning. They spoke explicitly of making me doubt my memory. Just keep asking her if she's sure Richard said that, undermining my confidence. Mention how that investment Richard made tanked last year. She probably doesn't even remember. And isolating me. Better if her friends don't visit too often right now. She needs to rely on us. They even discussed fabricating a story about Richard having second thoughts about leaving me in charge, planning to approach board members with this lie. The final recording I watched that night was from just 2 days ago. Arthur and Beatrice were back in the study. "She's weakening," Beatrice said with satisfaction. She almost agreed to the power of attorney yesterday. "Good," Arthur replied. "The board meeting is next week. We need her signature before then. Once I have control, we can start restructuring. Sell off the R&D division Richard was so sentimental about. Liquidate some assets, finally run this company properly." He laughed, a cold, grating sound. Richard always was too soft. I slammed the laptop shut, my entire body shaking with rage. They weren't just greedy. They were vultures circling, waiting to pick apart everything Richard had built, everything he had left me. And they were using my grief as their weapon. Richard's last words from the first video echoed in my mind. "Use this. Protect yourself." Oh, I would. The board meeting for Vance Innovations was scheduled for the following Tuesday. Arthur and Beatrice had been pushing for it, framing it as a necessary step to reassure shareholders after Richard's sudden death. I knew their real agenda: to formally propose Arthur take over as interim CEO, citing my fragile state and supposed inability to manage. They thought I was walking into an ambush. They had no idea I was setting a trap of my own. I spent the next few days playing the part they expected, the grieving, overwhelmed widow. I let Arthur explain complex financial documents, nodding vaguely, pretending confusion. I allowed Beatrice to help me organize Richard's study, feigning gratitude as she subtly rearranged things. I even let them believe I was seriously considering the power of attorney. "Perhaps you're right," I sighed during one conversation with Beatrice. "It's all just so much right now." I saw the flicker of triumph in her eyes. Meanwhile, I was working methodically. I made multiple copies of the memory card recordings. I contacted Mr. Henderson, Richard's trusted corporate lawyer, a man Arthur and Beatrice had conveniently excluded from their helpful interventions. I met him discreetly, laying out everything: the recordings, the gaslighting, their plan. His face grew grim as he listened. "Richard suspected something like this," he said quietly. "He put certain safeguards in place within the company bylaws. They can propose Arthur as CEO, but the board needs definitive proof of your incapacity, which they don't have. And more importantly, he tapped a clause in the company charter. Any attempt by a board member, which Arthur is, to gain control through fraudulent means or manipulation results in their immediate and permanent removal from the board and forfeiture of any stock options." Richard had built a fortress around his legacy. "They think they just need my signature or my emotional collapse," I told Henderson. "They don't know about the recordings." "Then let's ensure the reveal has maximum impact," he said, a strategic glint in his eyes. On the morning of the board meeting, I dressed carefully, not in black morning attire, but in a sharp, tailored navy suit Richard had always loved. I felt surprisingly calm, my grief overshadowed by a cold, clear resolve. I arrived at the Vance Innovations headquarters just before the meeting started. The boardroom was filled with the company's directors, scientists, executives, and investors Richard had handpicked over the years. Arthur and Beatrice were already there, seated near the head of the table, radiating confidence. Arthur gave me a brief, condescending smile. Beatrice offered a look of feigned sympathy. The meeting began with tributes to Richard, expressions of loss, and reassurances about the company's stability. Then, Arthur cleared his throat and stood up. "As you all know," he began, his voice smooth and authoritative, "Richard's passing has left a significant void. While Emily," he gestured towards me with faux deference, "is understandably devastated and overwhelmed, the company needs decisive leadership during this transition." Richard himself expressed concerns to me in recent months about the burdens of management. He was launching into the fabricated story they had planned. This was my moment. "Excuse me, Arthur," I interrupted, my voice clear and steady, cutting through his rehearsed speech. The entire board turned to look at me. Arthur paused, surprised by my interruption. Beatrice shot me a warning glance. "Before you continue with that narrative," I said, standing up and walking calmly to the head of the table where the presentation equipment was set up, "I believe there's something the board needs to see." I connected my laptop to the projector. Arthur started to protest. "Emily, this isn't the time or place." "On the contrary, Arthur," I replied, meeting his gaze directly. "This is precisely the time and place." I clicked play. Richard's face appeared on the large screen, clear and resolute, from the first hidden recording. "I suspect they will try to gaslight you, Emily. Make you doubt your memory, your competence. They want control." The boardroom was utterly silent. Arthur and Beatrice froze, their faces turning ashen. I let the recording play, then switched to a clip of them in the study, plotting. "She's completely lost. Plant a few doubts. She'll be begging us to take over." Followed by the clip of Arthur suggesting they sell off Richard's prized R and D division. Richard always was too soft. When the clips finished, I turned off the projector and faced the stunned board members. "For the past 3 months," I said, my voice shaking slightly but gaining strength, "my brother-in-law and sister-in-law have engaged in a systematic campaign of manipulation and gaslighting, attempting to exploit my grief to seize control of this company and my late husband's estate. They have lied, hidden documents, and actively worked to make me believe I was incapable of managing my own affairs, all while plotting to dismantle Richard's legacy for their own financial gain." Arthur leaped to his feet. "This is outrageous. Doctored footage. Lies. Is it?" Mr. Henderson stood up, holding a certified copy of the company bylaws. "According to Article 12, Section 4, any board member attempting to gain control through fraudulent means or manipulation forfeits their position and all associated benefits immediately." He looked directly at Arthur. "The evidence appears quite clear and quite damning." Beatrice burst into tears, the fragile facade finally shattering. "We were just trying to help. Richard would have wanted." "Richard," I interrupted, my voice ringing with conviction, "wanted his company protected. He wanted his wife respected, and he anticipated your greed." I held up the memory card. "He left me the tools to ensure his true wishes were honored." The board members, initially shocked, were now looking at Arthur and Beatrice with undisguised contempt. One of the senior directors, a woman Richard had deeply respected, stood up. "Arthur, Beatrice," she said, her voice cold, "based on this evidence, I move for your immediate removal from the board." The motion was seconded instantly. The vote was unanimous. Arthur and Beatrice sat in stunned silence as their world imploded. Security discreetly entered the room. As they were escorted out, Arthur shot me a look of pure hatred. Beatrice couldn't even look at me, her face buried in her hands. After they were gone, I addressed the remaining board members. "Vance Innovations was Richard's life's work," I said. "His vision was one of integrity and innovation. I intend to honor that vision, not just as his widow, but as the capable, clear-headed steward of his legacy." I outlined my understanding of the company's direction, referencing conversations Richard and I had shared, demonstrating a grasp of the business that Arthur and Beatrice had tried so hard to deny I possessed. That day, I didn't just expose a betrayal, I claimed my rightful place. The grief was still there, a dull ache beneath the surface, but it was now tempered by a fierce sense of purpose. Richard had left me more than just wealth. He had left me a mission. And standing there, in the boardroom he had built, I knew I was ready to fulfill it. The gaslighting had failed. The heirs had fallen. And I, Emily Vance, was finally in control.